Welcome to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where owners of privately held middle market companies talk about founding, scaling, and exiting their businesses successfully. Learn how to maximize and monetize your business on your own terms. Let's get started.
Hello, I'm Heather Bennett, your host for the Growth Plus Exit podcast, featuring business owners talking about founding, scaling, and potentially exiting their businesses successfully. And today we'll get to hear about one of those exits, which is very exciting. Past guests on the Growth Plus Exit podcast include Allison Cummins, CEO of Blue Outcomes, Kevin Poole, CEO of Newport, and Jody Jankowski, CEO of Blackline. This episode is brought to you by Newport LLC, a team of seasoned C-suite executives who help CEOs of privately held companies grow, de-risk, and exit their businesses successfully. To learn more about Newport, visit us at newportllc.com or find us on LinkedIn. And check the show notes for any of the websites or connections that I mentioned during the show. Today's guest is Kevin Fleming. Kevin is an experienced CEO, CFO, COO, and board member. He has a long and consistent track record of building company values, skillfully orchestrating business turnarounds and transformations, and ultimately monetizing at high valuations. And we'll talk about one of those situations today. Kevin has a strong business strategy, operations, technology, M&A, finance, and team building background. I had the pleasure of interviewing Kevin for the podcast earlier about another company, Loyale. And at the end of that conversation, he said, well, I do have another one. I said, great, let's bring you back so we can discuss that one as well. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Heather. It's great to be back again.
So today, tell me a little about Paradigm and how you got involved working with them.
Well, Paradigm, it's really a unique story because it's an extremely unique company. In fact, it may be the one that really defines, there's only one of these out there. So I got involved with Paradigm. I had just monetized. I led a very large business unit for electronic data systems and healthcare and financial services, Fortune 500 type clients, big players, had monetized out of that. And the game plan was to sit on the sidelines for a while, and vacation, maybe, feet in the sand in Hawaii. But, that got boring. And so I found myself looking for new opportunities. And one of them just popped out of nowhere. It was a friend who said, there's this company in Concord, California. That's a bedroom community of San Francisco. And, they've got a really unique, catastrophic injury healthcare practice, but they're struggling and, they're looking for a chief financial officer. And would you consider, interviewing for that position? And first blush reaction was no. That's the opposite end of the universe of where I've been working. And then I thought, well, why not be open-minded? So I met with company executives and the private equity firm, Sterling Capital, that was backing them. And things just clicked along quickly. And pretty soon I found myself in the CFO chair.
Excellent. So I know you had mentioned the founder. What role did Dr. Nathan Cook play in those early stages, bringing you on, getting you to be part of the team, determining the objectives that you had agreed that you were going to need to do?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Cope was engineered the entire concept. So he was the head of medicine at Stanford. And, he observed that a lot of the, catastrophic injuries. So that's the domain that this company operated in and still does today. And, so we're talking about the worst of the worst injuries, that have very little success with regards to long-term, even short-term patient outcomes. So spinal cord injuries, paraplegics, quadriplegics, severe burn cases, like 60% people have chemical fires or firemen in a large surface area of their bodies are actually burned. And severe brain injuries. So think about wounded warriors and police and people that have suffered gunshot wounds or otherwise really severe concussions, brain trauma, and just multiple trauma type cases. Where automobile accidents, trucking accidents, but where people really, if they weren't a death experience, they were a near-death experience many times. I mean, that's how severe these cases were. And Dr. Cope observed that, the medical community really wasn't very good at dealing with those cases because they required a long-term, multi-year vision on the care plan. They required real experts to make the right decisions from the get-go, within 24 hours and continue to make right decisions. And then a really tight model to manage the continuum of care, as those patients went through, acute care hospitals to stiff short-term, acute care to home health care, and then hopefully back to work or back to the community, which is the outcome model that he came up with, that, we're going to stand up here to, we're going to get these people back to work. If they were working before, we're going to get them back to the point where they can go to church or school or even the grocery store and not lay in a bed somewhere in a resting home that, a nursing home that, in effect having no quality of life really whatsoever. So that was the concept, and that really intrigued me. What a noble cause, what a and came up with a great care model. The problem was more on the numbers side of it, because it was kind of like the ultimate roll of the dice, and a really high risk that if you guarantee a clinical outcome, which this company did, and you guarantee it at a fixed cost. So I'm going to get, this traumatic brain injury patient back to work, and I guarantee it. And these were multi-million-dollar cases many times, but you pay me $1 million and I'll do that. And I'll keep going till I get there. And so some of those cases you didn't get there. Maybe you got there $3, $4, $5 million later and ate a big loss in the meanwhile. So that was it was intriguing to me, not just the nobility of the cause of, okay, let's make these people better, let's give them a much better solution, and but let's also let's fix this company financially. Let's fix the business model that is preventing it from making money. Because, as I used to like to say to the staff, and they probably got sick of hearing it from me, was, no money, no mission.
So, Kevin, you had mentioned the interesting point of the turnaround being having the mission and, be met by the financials. So and I know that that's something that a lot of our listeners are concerned about, is when you have a financial situation that doesn't, paradigm's a good word. How did you shift the way you were looking at the numbers and the way your team was looking at the numbers in order to get that turnaround financially?
Well, we did a number of things. And before I was able to fully tackle that, I became the chief executive officer. So I got a battlefield promotion, and which enabled me to do all the things that needed to be done. But number one, we developed a much better risk management capability. So we invested pretty heavily in what was then called a business intelligence neural net system. So think about, the forerunners to AI. Really smart systems, not nearly as adaptive as the current AI technologies, but if you pointed it at the right questions, the right challenges in the right way, it came back with highly valuable answers. So in this case, number one priority was to minimize or preferably eliminate what we called black swan cases, which were heavy losses. So like I had mentioned, if you spend $4 or $5 million on a case and you only get $1 million in revenue, that would be a black swan. So we're trying to understand those better at the point of underwriting, price for that risk better. And so we stood up a BI system using HP technology at that time, which was the best. And but more importantly, we asked it the right questions, and we kept working it until we got the answers. And as a result of that, those heavy loss black swan cases were reduced dramatically. And the other thing that it gave us the ability to do was better price for risk. So, because once we set a price, that was it. It was fixed, and there was no adjusting it. So it helped us to much better understand the risk premium and range of outcomes on a case, and then factor that into the pricing. And in order to pull that off, we had to better articulate our value proposition to customers, because many times that resulted in a higher price. So we engaged a firm, Milliman, well-known nationwide, highly regarded actuarial firm. And we went through a quantitative exercise to really benchmark our performance against the rest of the industry for these catastrophic injury cases. And the results that came back were astonishing. That we saved on average customers about 50% of what, if they spent $1 million with us, they would have spent $2 million on their own. And the clinical outcomes were off the charts better. We use return to work. Some of these cases were workers' compensation, but it's just kind of an easy, do you actually get somebody well enough to return to work? And the types of cases, as I described them, that was really hard to do. We got 60% of these patients back to work, and the industry standard was 10%. But we couldn't really stand that up as a tangible value proposition until we went through, this actuarial study. And it was important because we were dealing with financial buyers, people that were like Zurich Financial, Travelers Insurance, Chubb Insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield plans across the country. So we were selling to the payers, and they were very financial. If you couldn't stand up a credible value proposition, then the answer was always you're too expensive. Reduce your price. But when they really started to understand the value and that we had something to back it up, we didn't get nearly as much pricing resistance, and we were able to price for risk. And as a result of that, the financials improved very quickly. We went from heavy cash flow negative to cash flow positive to strong cash flow positive, and from there we took off into orbit with a fast growth trajectory, because it wasn't just about pricing cases; it was about articulating value in the marketplace. And so now we were finally in a position to be able to do that.
That's excellent. And I love that you focused on both the value proposition and taking the time to prove it through an outside service like an actuary. It truly shows, you said you were asking the right questions, but it shows how de-risking that sales proposition for the buyer, which in this case is in healthcare insurance, what that looks like. So, and interesting to think about when you look at where we are in terms of the healthcare industry right now, like how could this be applied even further? The concept, yeah. I wonder.
Well, this company was, interestingly enough, one of the board members, did a lot of work with, the government, with, the federal government in Washington, D.C. at the time. And so this company was actually used as the model for what's called accountable care organizations today, or ACO. So this was the very first ACO, the very first healthcare company. Like you said, the name Paradigm is pretty apropos here in a lot of ways, but it really changed the healthcare paradigm for catastrophic injury patients. And that was embraced, by at least the regulators in healthcare. And so they came up with a whole new class, called accountable care organizations, because that obviously that's a pretty darn good model, hard to pull off. But we proved that it could be pulled off, with the most challenging cases that you could imagine. So if that's true, then lower acuity cases, broken legs, hip replacements, whatever you go to the doctor for or the hospital, it should work in almost any setting.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So you talked about the company growing, and we've gotten through the transformation. Tell me the story of how you got to exit and, your relationship with Sterling. And you had mentioned Garrick Rice being a key person in that next transition.
Yeah, we were really lucky to, we were working with a private equity firm, and Garrick Rice in particular, one of the principals that we worked with the most, that was a real partner, so, some people are afraid to work with private equity, and rightfully so, because that doesn't always happen, where you get a real business partner that's there in the trenches with you, and when you say you need help on something, if they get you the resources you need, for example, for the business intelligence system and the actuarial studies. So that was very helpful. And we got the company on a strong growth trajectory. We got it on an even stronger EBITDA growth and cash flow trajectory. So, the time was right to go out and look at exit scenarios. And, we were a much more attractive player, and ultimately went on a roadshow. We ended up with another financial acquirer, Lightyear Capital, that picked up the company at a heavy multiple and a very significant ROI versus the original investment. But that company, the Paradigm has not only grew dramatically into that exit, but it continues today. It's now a multi-billion-dollar company and still has a lot of the foundational business model components that I described that we created really just to help it to survive, to live another day. But as it turned out, they were also long-term solutions.
And that's good to hear, because that's what you want in a transaction, is you want the acquiring company to gain the benefits of what they're acquiring, which is an excellent way to de-risk that transaction. So talk to me about what were some of the surprise pivotal moments during the time that you worked with Paradigm that you learned from, or that you'd like to share with other business owners or other executive teams as they're making these hard decisions for turnaround, especially?
Well, I think some of the pivotal and maybe most challenging moments were there was a legacy group that was there and part of the management team, and I wasn't really on board, with a new go forward strategy and embracing technology the way we did, among other things. And so lesson learned there was just don't fight gravity, right? I mean, they weren't the right people, and they were offered other roles in the company, but not in leadership. If you're not comfortable with your leadership team, if that's your sixth sense, or your hair standing up in your back or the top of your head, whatever it is, pay attention to it. Don't, it's those things are hard, especially, for me. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want people to be successful, but sometimes they're in a situation where that change conditions or otherwise, that's just not likely to happen. And another part of that was getting the right sales team in place. So now we had this, it was definitely a value-based sell that we could now, like I said, stand up, substantiate with the benefit of, the actuarial study. But you needed people that could sell to that, to a value-based model, not a commoditized model, which was more of what we had going in. So I think it's, sales has to be held accountable. It's there for a reason to make it rain, generate business and the right kind of business. And, that was a major change that we had to make, and we had to change personnel in order to do it. So really understanding, am I in a commodity market? Am I in a value-based market? Am I, something in between, a hybrid, but really understanding, how to consummate the successful sale and the type of people that you need to pull it off. So, yeah, I'd say those were the two. They were both challenging, but they were also pivotal, because fortunately we made the right call and got the right people, and it got a lot easier from there.
Excellent. And that's such good advice about finding the right person for the job and being willing to make sometimes I would think tough calls for founders when they've been working with people for a while, to say, you've done a great job, you've gotten us where we are now, but it's time for some different leadership. So what are you working on now? What are you passionate about? What are you looking forward to next? Since, this is the second time we've gotten to talk, and you clearly enjoy and are very good at getting these companies where they need to go. So what's next?
Well, yeah, I'm really excited about, and I'm working as a fractional CFO and board member for ThinkBio.AI. And that's, of course, working also as a partner with Newport. And, this company is, I don't want to jinx it by being too optimistic, but it has the potential to really be a blockbuster, I think, multi-billion-dollar type company. It's only been around a year, but it's really working on solving huge challenges for two industries. One is the biopharma industry, which is in a world of hurt right now, especially on the drug discovery side. There was a lot of money spent in the last 5 years and at stratospheric valuations, and a lot of those investments aren't panning out. But now with AI in particular to stimulate far more effective drug experimentation, coming up with the right hypotheses of what a successful drug looks like. And there's a lot of cellular biology that goes into this, which our company has, in addition to AI skills, in addition to clinical MD skills. But coming up with the right hypothesis, so heading out in the right track to begin with, matching that up with trial participants that really fit the drug, and determining early on, operating at light speed, compared to the way that it's been done in the past, dramatically reducing cost, and frankly, reducing the number of failed trials, or at least reducing the money spent on them with a whole new generation of AI-enabled risk management products. So, on the healthcare side, really providing care physicians in specialties. Patient Panorama is one of the products we have, but really giving them all the information they need with all the so-called omics data, including genomics, but more than that, on the very complex cases in oncology, cancer, cardiology, heart conditions, immunology, including things like lupus and so on. They're actually more prevalent than most people think, and extremely severe in terms of their consequences, and neurology, brain science. So really giving the physicians just that complete 360-degree view, and longitudinally and time-wise, and giving them a really good AI-enabled business partner tool to come to the right diagnosis and the right treatment plan and administer it in the right way. So, yeah, I'm really excited. It's AI is, this is kind of like chapter 2. Now I get to see, I described Paradigm, and that was embryonic at best, the business intelligence tools that we had then, 10 years ago or so, compared to what we have now. But it's unleashing, it's really pointing that technology in the right way, asking the right questions, solving the right business problems. But yeah, it's going to be a whole new ball game here in relatively short order. At geometric pace that it's expanding at, and the business problems that it'll be able to tackle. Effective only with like we've got the clinicians, we've got the biologists, all the lab white coats, as I call them. And so it's deep, heavy science, deep, heavy clinical expertise, and very strong and practical AI technology being brought together all in one. So it's pretty cool.
It is very cool. I've read, I know through Newport a little bit about ThinkBio, and it's exciting. Also, being a former white coat, because I was in research and development for a long time in cellular biology. I understand what the opportunities are for AI in the sphere, and it's very exciting. Anytime that we were able to get our hands on a new tool that would help us push the research forward faster was deeply appreciated. And increases the communication among different teams, we'll say, working in the labs to communicate and share that information faster is very exciting. So this has been great. I would love to, I have like a few more questions, but I want to focus on you as a mentor and a mentee. Over the years, you talk about the ability to ask the right questions. What are some of the best questions you've heard from your mentors, or some of the best questions that you've asked your mentees? Because I have no doubt you've mentored quite a few people during at least these two examples.
Yeah, I think, well, the best, where I was the student, and I was getting mentoring advice in my career to, I think the very best of, really pay attention. You don't know. I mean, the next best great idea could be right in front of you, and if you're in absentia, you're on your cell phone, or you're checking, you're not really engaged, you might miss it, right? Mm-hmm. Or miss a nuance that takes you to down a different path. I think the other, I remember early on I was a senior partner at Ernst & Young, and mm-hmm. led a large M&A unit, but I started out as a young buck, and in the accounting and auditing field. And, I remember one of the partners that, for some unknown reason, took a liking to me. He said, all the success is out there, meaning not in the office. It's out there with clients. It's out there, with business prospects. It's out there solving problems. It's, so, solve on those key focus on those key external stakeholders and solving their problems, and good things are likely to follow. So, I think, flipping it around to where I mentor people, it's, really focus on your current job and what it takes to be successful. And don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you don't know, you don't know, and don't pretend that you know, but, go out and find the answers. So, and that can apply to CXX level players also, right? I mean, it's kind of, well, I think this is, this is my read on the market. I really have kind of a blind side and, but information, but I'll go with my gut. And, that's maybe not the right thing to do. It's, if you're making important decisions, you need to have the best information you can get, so you make the best decision possible. So, and the other thing that I like to say is, and I'm sure I didn't invent this phrase, but I'll take credit for it anyway, is, those who never quit cannot be defeated. So, just because you're encountering, some problems right now, just, figure out what's going on and how to turn the ship around and head it, like I call it, compass point north in a positive direction. And then keep doing that until you get there. So I think it's easy to become, especially with the complexity of business challenges today, and to be frustrated, not know what to do, make decisions maybe. I mean, right now, the risk meter, I think, in the current business environment is amping up. a bit. There's a bit more economic uncertainty. There's certainly transformational risk, in particular if you're not on the right cutting edge of the AI sword, because that's going to change every industry. Some dramatically so, many I think dramatically so. So you got to be making the right decisions, and sometimes the past is prologue, and it's not indicative of the future. So that's, you can certainly benefit from experience, but we talked about Paradigm as a business company, but I think the whole business landscape is undergoing a paradigm shift right now. And yes, AI is at the heart of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do have one last question, but before I ask it, I wanted to point our listeners to how they can reach you through, you can find Kevin on LinkedIn or via our website, newportllc.com. I can't wait to see what happens with this company and the next one you work with as well. They are very lucky to have you, and I'll be interested to see how those grow. So my final question has to do with exiting. Since this is the Growth Plus Exit podcast, what piece of advice would you give to listeners, business owners who are considering exit? There's a million things they need to keep in mind. What is something that you didn't expect would have such a big role with the exit of this company, of Paradigm?
Well, I think my best advice on exiting is you need to see a viable play, a scenario, and at some level of depth, or you don't have an exit scenario right now. It's so if you're going to be selling to a financial acquirer, obviously your financial attributes need to be tuned up. If you're selling to a strategic, then you need to know what the types of strategics that you would be selling to would really value, would really covet, and make certain that you're playing strong there. And definitely have the future, the next 5 years kind of laid out, because nobody buys a business for what it did in the past. They're all buying it for what it does in the future. And so the 1, 3, 5 year trajectory, that's a big part of why, I've sold to strategics, I've sold to financial acquirers, but that's what they're interested in. So if you have problems like, management succession, and which we would have had at Paradigm, that was a surprise to me. Frankly, I didn't think I'd have to, make major changes at just about every management position, but, senior management position, but I did. And, but boy, did that pay off, not just in terms of business results, to the point of acquisition, but in terms of the acquirer, in this case, a financial acquirer that really needed a strong seated senior executive management team in place in terms of their willingness to go forward with the transaction, because now the team was already in place to fulfill the next leg of the mission, which greatly de-risked it for them and maximized financial value for us.
Excellent. It's always interesting to hear what it is that surprised people during that process, because there's a lot going on. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing yet another wonderful example of a successful company exit. I can't wait to hear what comes next for you, and just very grateful for your time. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you very much, and good luck everybody out there.
Thank you for listening to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, sponsored by Newport, a unique national business advisory firm. If you enjoy this show, be sure to share, like, and subscribe for future episodes.